Hi everyone! Today we'll be looking at how to simplify fractions. Given a fraction, you will be able to simplify it using the idea of greatest common factors. Let's start off by looking at the idea of factors. Factors are numbers that we can multiply together to get another number. So they are numbers that we multiply together to get another number. So for example, let's look at this. 2 times 3 equals 6. In this case, 2 and 3 are factors of 6 because we multiply them together to get the number 6. So for this example, we are asked to find all factors of 8. We're going to find all numbers that can multiply to 8. In other words, we're going to find all numbers that 8 is divisible by. 1 is a factor because 1 times 8 equals 8. And 2 is a factor because 2 times 4 equals 8. 3 is not a factor of 8, but 4 is a factor of 8. And lastly, 8 itself is also a factor of 8. So when we're finding factors, remember to always list the number itself. So 1 and the number itself will always be factors of that number. Let's look at another example. 24 actually has quite the number of factors. So go ahead and pause the video, try to write out all factors of 24, and press play when you're ready. So 1 is always a factor. 2 is also a factor of 24. So is 3. 4. 5 is not a factor, but 6 is a factor of 24. Also 8, 12, and 24. Notice how when we list out all factors, we have some factor pairs. For example, 1 times 24 equals 24. 2 times 12 equals 24. 3 times 8 equals 24. And 4 times 6 equals 24. Next, let's look at the idea of greatest common factors. The greatest common factor is the largest factor that 2 or more numbers have in common. So it's the largest factor that 2 or more numbers share. And a good way to remember the idea of the greatest common factor is to break down the term. Greatest means largest. To have something in common means to have something shared with someone or something else. And a factor, like we looked at earlier, is a number that you multiply with. So let's look at some examples. For example 1, we're going to find the greatest common factor of 12 and 16. What we're going to do first is list out all factors for 12 and all factors for 16. Let's start off by looking at the factors of 12. And if you have questions about how to find these factors, definitely let me know. So the factors of 12 are the numbers that 12 is divisible by. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and also 12 itself. Next, let's look at factors of 16. So what numbers will multiply to 16? 1, 2, 4, because 4 times 4 is 16, 8, and 16. Next, we're going to find factors that these two share in common. So 1, 2, and also 4 are all common factors of 12 and 16. But the largest common factor is 4. So our greatest common factor, or the GCF, is 4. To find the greatest common factor of two or more numbers, we first write out the factors of each number, find any common factors, and then choose the largest or the greatest common factor. Let's look at another example. We're going to find the greatest common factor of 12 and 30. Let's start off by writing all factors of 12. You can actually look at the example right before this since we already talked about the factors of 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12 are all factors of 12. And then next, let's look at all factors of 30. So we're going to write out all numbers that can multiply to 30. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, 15, and 30. Where do we see common factors? 1 is a common factor, so is 2. 3 is also a common factor, as well as 6. And here, the largest common factor between the two is 6. So our greatest common factor, or GCF, is 6. Let's look at one more example for finding the GCF. We're going to find the greatest common factor of 2 and 8. Let's write out the factors of 2 first. The factors of 2 are simply 1 and 2. Next, let's look at the factors of 8. The factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. Let's look at the common factors. 1 is a common factor, and so is 2. The greatest common factor between the two numbers is 2. Notice how 2 is actually the first number itself. But that's okay, we still count this as the greatest common factor. Now that we're familiar with the idea of finding the greatest common factor, let's look at how to simplify fractions. Fractions are also known as ratios. Here, I have a fraction a over b. A, which is our number on top, is called the numerator. And then b, which is our number on the bottom, is called our denominator. So for example, if we had 3 over 5, 3 would be our numerator and 5 would be our denominator. So how do we simplify fractions? To simplify a fraction, divide both the numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. And we like to simplify fractions as much as possible, just so they're easier to work with. For our first example, we're going to simplify the fraction 15 over 20. We want to find the greatest common factor of the numerator and the denominator. In this case, our numerator is 15. So first, I'm going to write all factors of 15. 1, 3, 5, and 15 are all factors of 15. And next, let's look at the denominator, 20. We're going to write all factors of 20. So that would be 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. Let's find common factors. 1 is a common factor, and so is 5. In this case, the largest common factor is 5. So our greatest common factor, also known as the GCF, is 5. So what we're going to do is write out the original fraction, 15 over 20, and divide both the numerator and the denominator by 5. 15 divided by 5 equals 3 over 20 divided by 5, which equals 4. So we've simplified this fraction by dividing both the numerator and denominator by the GCF of the numerator and denominator. For example 2, we're going to simplify the fraction 8 over 20. First, let's look at the numerator 8. We're going to write out all factors of 8. So that's going to be 1, 2, 4, and 8. Next, let's write out the factors for our denominator, 20. So the factors of 20 are 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. Let's look at the common factors, 1, 2, and 4. Notice how 4 is the largest common factor, so our greatest common factor, our GCF, is 4. So this means that we're going to have our original fraction, 8 over 20, and divide both the numerator and denominator by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2, 20 divided by 4 is 5, so we've simplified the fraction to 2 over 5. Lastly, let's simplify the fraction 25 over 50. First, let's focus on our numerator 25. We're going to write all factors of 25. That would be 1, 5, and 25. Next, let's write out the factors for our denominator, 50. The factors of 50 are 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, and 50. Both numbers have the following common factors, 1 and 5, and also 25. The greatest common factor is 25. So let me write that here. Our GCF is 25. So we have our original fraction, 25 over 50, and we're going to divide both the numerator and denominator by 25. 25 divided by 25 is 1, and 50 divided by 25 is 2. We've simplified the fraction to 1 over 2, or in other words, 1/2. Here's a review for today's lesson. Factors are numbers that we can multiply together to get another number. The greatest common factor, or the GCF, is the largest factor that 2 or more numbers have in common. And you can simplify a fraction by dividing its numerator and denominator by the greatest common factor. Awesome job today, and please remember to submit your notes on Canvas. Thank you.